And welcome to the world beyond belief. I'm your co-host, Paul Marco,
And I'm your other co-host, Mindy
both
Erkin.
co-hosting.
Well, tonight we have a really exciting show. We're going to talk about secret underground civilizations. We're going to talk about magic and a little bit about a book called The Coming Race, which we mentioned in the last episode. Hopefully you caught episode 110, Hitler's Saucers.
If you didn't, it's got a lot of good information in it, and I'm sure you'd enjoy it. We're going to start today by pondering a mystery. And let me read this from Invisible Eagle 3. On 25th of April 1945, or so the story goes, a group of battle-weary Russian soldiers were making their cautious way through the shattered remnants of Berlin, mopping up the isolated pockets of German resistance that remained in the heart of the Third Reich. The soldiers moved carefully from one wrecked building to another, in a state of constant readiness against the threat of ambush. In a ground floor room of one of the blasted buildings, the soldiers made a surprising discovery. Laying in a circle on the floor, there were bodies of 6 men, with a 7th corpse in the center. All were dressed in German military uniforms, and the dead man in the center of the group was wearing a pair of bright green gloves. The Russians' assumption that the bodies were those of soldiers was quickly dispelled when they realized that the dead men were all Orientals. One of the Russians, who was from Mongolia, identified the men as Tibetans. It was also evident to the Russian soldiers that the men had not died in the battle, but seemed to have committed suicide. Over the following week, hundreds more Tibetans were discovered in Berlin. Some of them had clearly died in battle, while others had committed ritual suicide, like the ones discovered by the Russian unit.
What were the Tibetans doing in Nazi Germany towards the end of the Second World War? The answer to this question may be found in a curious novel entitled The Coming Race by Edward Bulwer-Lytton. Throughout his career, Bulwer-Lytton wrote on many themes, including romance, politics, history, social satire, melodrama, and the occult. It is perhaps unsurprising, therefore, that he should have turned to the subject of utopian science fiction with The Coming Race, published in 1871. In this novel, the narrator, a traveler, an adventurer of independent means, explores a mine in an unnamed location and discovers a vast subterranean world inhabited by a superior race of humans called the Vrilya.
So we're going to use this podcast to delve into The Coming Race and look at that for three really good reasons. First of all, it's probably the most important book in the 20th century, since it so heavily influenced Hitler, Nazi Germany, and of course, I'm not sure the Nazis really lost the war. I know Germany did. I think a lot of the Nazis came to the U.S. and are working with the cabal here. So anyway, that's one of the reasons it's important. The second reason, it gives us an opening to talk about underground civilizations. Now, this is not part of our, white bread American culture to think about underground civilizations, but all over the world it is. Norway, Germany, France, Iceland, Greece, Mayan, Egyptian, Indian, Hindu, Buddhist, Chinese, just to name a few. And we run into this notion of underground cultures also in our travels. And I think the third reason is it gives us a primer to talk about occult magic, magic that's used on the planet and around us, but because of our education or because of our diseducation, we discount it as being something that's not real. We're either into religion or science. The whole subject of magic is is kind of a no-no. So to start that conversation about magic, there's two different types of magic. There's white magic and there's black magic. And one seems to be for good and one seems to be for evil. There's a really great quote by W.O. Schumann that we read in the last podcast, and I think it's important to reiterate here.
This comes from the German SS Secret Archives. Schumann says, "In everything we recognize two principles that determine the events, light and darkness, good and evil, creation and destruction. As in electricity we know plus and minus. It is always either or. These two principles, the creative and the destructive, also determine our technical means. Everything destructive is of satanic origin. Everything creative is divine. Every technology based upon explosion or combustion has thus to be called satanic. The coming new age will be an age of new, positive, divine technology."
I think he correctly sets that off. There's good and bad magic. They call it white and black magic. Now, we don't know a whole lot about magic, but we've been exposed to it a little bit. And I know that white magic is magic for the good of everybody. It's unselfish. It's unselfish magic. This is as defined by Manly Hall. I believe I read this in there. Black magic is for self-interest. It's rituals and practices that use occult forces only for your self-good. And I've got some examples of both. In white magic, I think a good example of white magic is studying the prana or the chi, which was unrecognized by science until the 1980s because it couldn't be measured. You see, science is a great thing and a wonderful tool unless its inabilities obscure truth. For centuries, I mean, they found stone acupuncture needles that are 5,000 years old, made out of stone. So the knowledge of the chi, which I consider to be a type of magic, has been around forever, but we couldn't acknowledge it here in the West because our science couldn't measure it. But anyway, there's that magic. There's also evidence of building techniques and craft techniques that can't be replicated today with ordinary, what I call mundane tools. I think magic could have been involved in those too. And then there's a remarkable study of magic done by it's on the Maharishi effect. It's done by meditators using transcendental meditation to affect change, using what I consider to be a type of white magic. I write about it in my book, Belief Magic, Decoding the Belief Matrix.
By using the power of transcendental meditation, ordinary humans practicing this form of meditation were found to have a profound effect on reducing crime in targeted cities. I recall one of these studies that had occurred in Washington, D.C. In the summer of 1993, a group of 4,000 TM practitioners from 62 countries descended upon Washington, D.C. to experiment with the Maharishi effect and see what results this phenomenon could have on the crime rate. I recall that when the chief of police in D.C. was given a summary of the results expected to be gained in this effort, he laughed and said something to the effect of that the only way that crime could drop that significantly in D.C. would be if there was a major snowstorm, so severe that it would totally cripple the city and stop all transportation. Then perhaps the result could be achieved. The meditators had the last laugh, however, when a final report issued by a 27-member independent team of scientists and community leaders found that indeed the reduction in crime predicted by the formulators of the study had occurred with a 21% decrease in the most violent crime categories. With the preponderance of scientific evidence to back it up, we can safely say The TM is a powerful tool using what I will call occult energy that can be used to harness constructive power to affect positive changes in large populations.
Yeah, and I was always amazed after that study, after all of those studies, that said conclusively you can really do positive things on the earth with large groups of meditators. Why don't we do that? I mean, if we're opposing forces that seem to be evil, well, maybe it'd just be too hard to get people together.
I know, I don't think that people really get that they can effect great change.
Right.
Yeah.
This is one way. Moving along to black magic. The first time we ran into black magic, Mindy and I were in Brazil, and we were riding along with a person that we had met that was very much into magic, mostly white magic. And we passed by a strange thing on the side of the road. It was the wheel from a car. Tell me if I'm wrong on this. It's a wheel from a car, and chained to it was the corpse of a goat. There was a bottle of whiskey there, and there was something else. Might have been some kind of food. Do you remember?
I can't remember the other object, but I think there was an additional thing there.
So, you know, it's so unusual on the side of the road. So we asked our friend, what the hell is that? And he says, oh, it's a black magic. It's the results of a black magic ceremony to have somebody killed. So that's an example of black magic, you know, where whoever did it, the group or the person, had done this ceremony to wish ill will, and that's black magic. Another one that I remember reading about, well, there's an ancient Babylonian or Canaanite ceremony called the Cremation of Care ceremony, which was held every year to ensure that the wealthy people in the community would stay wealthy. Now here's how it started. It started with an orgy to the female goddess Isis, and after the orgy, it would continue on to the actual core cremation of care ceremony.